Mark 5, 1 through 20. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to see Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Blair. What we've been doing for the past few months in this portion of our worship service is we've been looking at the first half of the Gospel of Mark and just kind of slowly walking our way through it. And today that brings us to chapter 5, which is a very bizarre story and very weird and very creepy. It's about a guy who is not just possessed by one demon, which would be weird and creepy enough, but is possessed by like an army of demons. This is probably a better passage for Halloween than Good Friday, but here we are. We didn't plan it this way. But, you know, anytime you start to think about the concepts of demons or Satan or evil, you know, as modern people, we can have some interesting reactions to it because it can just feel it's so foreign to so much of our experience. But there's two mistakes that we can make. Mistake number one is to just deny the reality of evil altogether. You say things like, okay, you cannot really expect us to believe demons, like fork-tongued goblin things running around in the universe. Like people back then did not understand mental health, mental illness, and so, of course, they just misdiagnosed psychiatric problems as demonic problems. So that might be how you're thinking. Andrew Delbanco is a Columbia professor at Columbia. He's a Columbia professor, and he's a social scientist. And he's not a Christian, but he writes a lot about Satan, interestingly enough. One of the things that he writes is this, quote, "When we stopped believing in Satan, a gulf opened up between the visibility of evil and the intellectual resources available for coping with it." In other words, what he's saying is, okay, for us modern people in the West, we've kind of gotten rid of the idea of Satan and evil and all that stuff. So we don't have that as a category anymore. But he said, when we did that, that has created this gulf of, okay, well, then we now have no resources to make sense of or how to cope with it when we see it. When you see somebody do something really horrific, really evil, if we don't have that as a category, our only option is then to try to explain what happened by some natural cause. Oh, this horrible serial killer, they must have had some sort of trauma in their childhood. They must have had terrible education growing up or some sort of psychological defect they just inherited genetically. We got to have some explanation. And what Delbanco is saying is those kinds of explanations, not only do they not make sense of something that is so horrific, but then you don't have any resources to cope with it. I'll give you another example. I don't know, a couple months ago, I rewatched the movie Silence of the Lambs, which I don't recommend doing. But fun fact, I did not realize that a big portion of the story takes place in Memphis. Who would have thought? Hannibal Lecter down in the Shelby County courthouse downtown, but there he is. But the story, if you remember, is you've got Jodie Foster who plays Officer Starling. And she's been assigned to try to make sense of this notorious serial killer who's behind bars. He's locked up, Hannibal Lecter. And she's trying to understand him. Why are you the way that you are? And she's trying to figure him out. And she asks him at one point, what happened to you? And here's what he says. He says, nothing happened to me, Officer Starling. He says, I happened. I can't be reduced to a set of influences. You have given up good and evil for behaviorism, Officer Starling. Nothing is now anybody's fault. Look at me. Can't you stand to say I'm evil? He's saying, hey, I grew up in a good home and educated, and we had resources. There are no influences. I happened. Can you just have the category that some people are evil? So the first mistake that we can make is to deny evil. The other mistake is to absolutize evil. It's to say, okay, yeah, there were demons back then. There's demons now. Demons are hiding behind every chair and nook and cranny. They're waiting in the alleyway to jump out and get you. It's a way to explain everything that's wrong in the world and just attribute it to something demonic. So, car accident, demons. Or you fail your science quiz, demons. You get a pimple before the big date, demons. And for those of us who claim to be Christians, we want to be as balanced as the Bible is balanced. The Bible affirms the reality of evil. It talks about real, intelligent, personal, supernatural, spiritual beings that are intending to bring harm to people. The Bible affirms the existence of evil. In fact, you may not have believed it in your heart, but you at least affirmed it with your mouth this morning if you prayed the Lord's Prayer with us, as we pray every single week at Redeemer. We say, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're praying about. But even though the Bible affirms the reality of evil in the world, it doesn't absolutize it. It does not assume, demons are waiting behind in every alley, behind every bush, waiting to jump out and get you. You're responsible for your actions. You're held accountable for what you decide to do or not do, not some demonic influence in your life. And so, even though this passage is very weird, and it raises way more questions than it provides answers, I think it is helpful because it helps us understand and give some categories to make sense of something that is just incomprehensible, which is evil. And so let's look at it. I think we learn two things. We learn about the influence of evil, and we learn about the defeat of evil. The influence and the defeat. So let's start with the first one, because that's what you do with first things. You start with them. So we'll look at the first one first, the influence of evil. And I want to look closer at this actual man, because You read through the story, it kind of reads like a Stephen King book. He's out living alone in a graveyard. He's naked, running around screaming day and night. He's got this whole nest of demons inside of him somehow. But I want to make 3 observations about this guy. 3 observations about him. Observation number 1, he is uncontrollable. Look at verse 3. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Which shows you, at one point, he was living in the village, living in the town, part of society, and my guess is he was causing so much chaos and disruption around him. The people did the only thing that they knew to do, which is we just got to bind him up, put some chains on this dude, get him some handcuffs. And somehow the evil gave him strength where he was able to bust through it like, the Hulk or something. So they're trying to restrain him, they're trying to contain him, but he's uncontrollable. You cannot restrain him, and he's out of control himself. Second observation, he is isolated. He lives alone in a graveyard among the tombs. And did you notice in verse 3, it gives us helpful detail. It says, no one could bind him anymore, which shows you that people have stopped trying. They've given up on this dude. This is a lost cause, hopeless case. We'll be okay if he just stays over there. Observation 3, he is self-destructive. Verse 5 says that he cuts himself with stones, so he's practicing self-harm. And this is interesting. In verse 7, when Jesus shows up and he runs up to Jesus, he shouts at him, I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Which shows you he knows that Jesus is going to do something, but he does not experience it as healing. He experiences it as torment, as torture. I mean, this is the epitome of self-sabotage, where everything is reversed. He is harming himself, and then help comes, and not only does he not want help, he sees it as a threat. That's going to bring more harm to me. So you put those 3 observations together, and you can see this is the influence of evil. It's when you are self-destructive, and when you isolate, and when you're out of control. You might almost say that this is the playbook of evil. Like this is what evil, when it shows up in your life, it's taken these forms. Now, if you feel out of control yourself, or if you feel isolated from other people, or if you feel I've got some self-destructive instincts, that doesn't mean you're possessed by demons. But it means you're being worked. It means you're being played. That evil is this thing outside of you that's doing something in your world and in your life. Maybe you think of it like this, because I know this can be confusing and sound weird, but let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that you are in a band. You're a member of a rock and roll band. Your band name is Panini Fingers. And you're playing a show at Lafayette's. You play electric guitar. And y'all decide as a band, we're going to start with our big opening number. It's a crowd pleaser. It's a song called Mama Burn the Muffins. And so you're playing Mama Burn the Muffins, and you're doing it. Mama Burn the Muffins! And you're going for it. But then halfway through the song, you decide, I don't want to play this song anymore. I want to do one of our deep tracks, kind of our B-side that only some of the true fans would really know about, a song called Nasal Passage. And so you just switch halfway through, and you switch to Nasal Passage. And now it's in conflict with everybody else in the band, and it sounds awful, and it's chaotic. And they're yelling at you what are you doing? Get back to Mama Burn the Muffins. But you can't hear them because your amp has been turned up so loud, it's the only thing that you can hear. Now, here's why I'm talking about this, is because it's, in some ways, that's how evil functions in the world. You have your own selfish, foolish impulses, and Satan comes along and just turns up the amp So he's working on your own sinful impulses, your own selfishness, your own neuroses, your own envy, your bitterness, your despair, your rage, all of that stuff that's already in us. It's not like Satan's coming along and inserting weird, evil thoughts into our brains. It's not like you're getting invaded like in Beetlejuice and then your head starts spinning around. It's just, no. Let me take what's already in there and just turn it up. So here's what I want to do is think about this pattern, these three observations that we made, evil's playbook, how evil influences us, and just lay it over the course of your life and apply it to us and see how we do. So here's application number 1. When you are out of control, evil's at work. Just like this guy, he tried to be, they tried to chain him up, they tried to bind him up, and he burst through the restraints. We try to restrain ourselves. So we do things like, well, let's put an internet filter on our computer, or let's put a porn blocker on our phone, and, evil can give you this real strength. You can just blow right past all those obstacles. Or you have these struggles where it's like there's things that I'm doing that I don't want to do, and so you want to stop. I want to control my disordered eating. I want to get that under control. Or I got to get some control over how codependent I just am, or an actual addiction to my phone or substances or alcohol or whatever. And we try to put some new practices in place or new habits, new things, and we just default right back. And we just feel out of control. And it's because there's this deeply embedded thing in us that says, I want to do what I want to do. And nobody else has the right to tell me how to live my life. And evil comes along and says, yeah, more of that. And turns up the volume. Well, here's application number 2. When you are isolated from others, evil's at work. Satan's ultimate goal is disconnection. It is to disconnect you from God. It's to disconnect you from other people, to disconnect you from yourself. C.S. Lewis wrote this amazing little book called The Great Divorce. It's a fictional story. It's a story about a group of people in hell who take a field trip to heaven. It's just an interesting, weird concept. It's like they all get in a bus in hell and they go up to heaven. But when he describes, in the opening chapters, when he describes the landscape of hell, he doesn't describe it as this scary place with like lava and lakes of fire, like the Nether in Minecraft. So he doesn't describe it like that. He describes it as an ever-expanding suburb. Isn't that interesting? Where everybody just moves further and further away from everybody else because nobody can get along. And his idea is that if in this life, if you're the kind of person that feels so justified in being right, and you bicker with people, and you're so easily annoyed with people, and then when other people upset you, you just refuse to reconcile. You're moving away from other people. Lewis is saying you're on a trajectory towards ultimate, eternal isolation. If the impulse in you is, I cannot stand these people, I got to get away from these people, and let's withdraw, let's get away, you take that and you amplify that over the course of eternity, that's called hell, utterly alone. And so here's the question, do you feel that pull inside of you, I've got to get away from these people, I can't stand these people? Maybe it's, I cannot stand my neighbor who cannot get that stupid dog under control. When are they going to move? Or maybe we should move. We got to get away from these people. Or maybe it's, I cannot stand being around that person. You ever heard that person talk? They are so full of themselves. They are so self-righteous, so smug. Ugh, got to get away from them. And there's this thing in us, this deeply embedded instinct that says, I am right And I cannot tolerate being around someone who is like this or who is like that. And evil comes along and says, yeah, let's turn the dial up on that. Application number 3. If you have an impulse that looks and feels self-destructive, evil's at work. And there are so many examples of this. I mean, it's scary how much we sabotage ourselves. But I'll give you a few examples. Let's say that you really are struggling with an addiction, a substance, or something that is harming you or damaging your life or damaging your relationships. And you have friends, or you have a spouse, or you have a coworker, or somebody who wants to talk to you about it and wants to intervene and confront you, says, hey, we're worried about you. We think you might have a problem. And instead of receiving that as love, it feels like a threat. You feel judged. You feel angry. You feel defensive. Who are you to tell me how to live my life? And you feel, this is, I don't have a problem. And so here comes help. And rather than seeing and receiving it as help, it's interpreted as harm, and it's rejected, so that you can go back to the thing that's causing damage in your life. That's self-destruction. Or if you have a really shameful part about your own story, something that you have done or something that was done to you, and deep down it can feel like no one can know about this. If anyone finds out about this, they're going to change the way that they feel about me, change the way that they relate to me. They're going to reject me. And so we have this instinct to, okay, we got to hide all that. Lock that up. No one can know. And Jesus comes along and says, hey, the way that you actually get healing and life and help is you bring that thing into the light and you process it with a trusted friend or a pastor or a counselor or somebody, but you bring it into the light, you got to process it with other people. And you know as well as I do, that feels like that will ruin me. That will not help me. That's a path towards pain and rejection and destruction. And so then we hold it all in. Nope. And we just keep in this thing that's terrorizing our soul, all of this shame, all of this self-hatred, self-destruction. One more example. You have somebody who hurts you or upsets you, and that thing just gets activated inside of us where we just feel so angry and so bitter and so jaded. We just hold on to this resentment, and it's just like harboring poison in our guts. It's just eating us up from the inside. And Jesus comes along and says, the way that you get healing and health and life is to release that, to forgive this person. And you know as well as I do, that does not feel like life. That feels like death. You cannot ask me to let go of this. This is my precious. I need to hold on to this. This is what gives me a sense of rightness and power and control. I'm not going to just forgive this person. Who do you think you are? Are you trying to ruin me? You're going to torment me? We self-sabotage. It's because we have this deeply embedded belief that says, I know what's best for me. I know where life is found and healing and help is found, and I know where death is found. And I know the difference. I don't need your help, thank you. And Jesus comes along, or Satan comes along and says, yeah, more of that. Turn it up. It's the influence of evil. If we stopped here, this would be the most depressing sermon ever. But this passage is not written to depress us. It's not written to scare us. There is incredible good news in this passage. Because what's even more important than just understanding the influence of evil, it's more important that we see the defeat of evil. So let's look at the second thing, the defeat of evil. And I really just kind of want to walk through the story briefly with you. Look at how it starts. It begins by telling us that Jesus and his disciples, they show up in this area called the country of the Gerasenes, which is a Gentile area, which means this is, in the Jewish mind, these are unclean people. This is an unclean area. This is the bad neighborhood. You don't go to this part of town. But Jesus is beelining it towards this place. And he's almost like a heat-seeking missile who is going there straight for this guy. We talked about last week what happened when they were on the boat. There was this big giant storm that he ended up calming down, but it was his idea to cross to the other side, and he gets to the other side because he's going after this guy. In fact, you know this is his purpose because we'll see in a second, after he heals this guy, he leaves. He did the thing he came for. He is beelining it towards this wild, out-of-control, violent man. So Jesus and his friends, they show up on the shore, and here comes this wild, chaotic, naked man running towards them, screaming at the top of his lungs. And in verse 6, it says he falls down before Jesus, and he screams at him, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God?" Now, nobody has referred to Jesus as the Son of the Most High God up to this point in the Gospel of Mark. This is high praise. And Jesus looks at him, and he asks him his name. And that's just a small little easy detail that's just kind of easy to throw away, but don't miss how important that is. Every other time this guy is referred to and referenced in this story, he's referred to by his problem. He's referred to as the demon-possessed man, the man who was possessed by a demon. Even at the end, when Jesus gets the demons out, he was the man who was demon-possessed. That's how everybody else describes him and labels him by his problem. And Jesus does not see him that way. He says, "What's your name?" And in fact, look at verse 8. It says that he says to the man, Jesus says to this guy, "Come out of him, you unclean spirit." He separates the guy from this unclean spirit in him. He dignifies this man by saying, "You are not your biggest problem. I'm going to deal with your problem, but that's not who you are." So this guy tells him his name. He says, "My name is Legion." Legion is a technical term to refer to a Roman squadron of about 6,000 soldiers. So scholars think that the reason why he refers to himself as Legion, that there's like hundreds, thousands of demons in him. This is where it's like pretty wild, that Jesus is standing before an army of evil. It's like a total David and Goliath situation. You got one man, little unimpressive rabbi, up against hordes of orcs, like as far as the eye can see. And it says that with a word, Jesus tells all those demons to go into these pigs that were grazing nearby, and the pigs run down a hill, and then they fall into the water, and they all drown, and they all die. Now, that's really bizarre, and it's so weird, and we don't have a lot of answers, but don't miss the point. Don't miss the big point. Here's the big point. In just a few moments, we're going to sing Martin Luther's song, classic song, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." In the third verse of that song, he talks about the prince of darkness, grim. He's talking about Satan. And the last line of that verse, he says, "One little word shall fell him." Fell is this word that we use in reference to like chopping down trees. I've always thought that's a weird word. When we chop down a tree, we say, "Oh, we felled the tree." That sounds like a weird way to say that, but that's the word we use. And Martin Luther is saying, okay, it's like Satan is this gigantic oak tree. How are you going to chop down a ginormous oak tree? One little word knocks it right over. And you see that happening with Jesus. He's up against this army. Go over there, done, dead, over. Unimaginable power that Jesus possesses. Just totally decimates, the evil stands no chance in front of Jesus. And then all the people from the town, when they hear about what just happened, they show up and they throw this massive party for Jesus because they're so excited about what he's done. Oh, never mind. That's not what they do. They say, "Jesus, you got to leave." They kick him out of the country. They beg him to leave. You see that. This is verse 17. You know why? Because they just lost 2,000 pigs. Remember, this is Gentile territory, not Jewish. Jewish is not raising pigs. These Gentiles are raising pigs not as a hobby, not because these are like pets. This is their livelihood. And Jesus just decimated the economy. And so they're like, "You got to go." And here's what we learn is that they cared more about the bottom line than they did this guy being healed. In their mind, they're saying, okay, we wish we had the pigs back, and wish we had this guy gone. This doesn't seem like a very good trade. Give us our money, give us the pigs back. So you can see they care more about money than they do people, which shows you that evil is at work in them too. It's not in the splashy Stephen King kind of way, but evil's in there and Satan's dialing up the thing. But because you know what they're basically saying? They're basically saying, he's not worth it. This guy, 2,000 of our pigs, not worth it. And Jesus is looking at them and saying, oh, he's worth it. Because it was costly to heal this guy. I mean, to heal this guy, it cost 2,000 pigs. But to ultimately heal this man, it would cost Jesus his life. To ultimately rescue and liberate this man, it would cost Jesus everything. And Jesus says, I'm in, because it's worth it. When you get to the end of the Gospel of Mark, you see the price that Jesus paid for Legion and for me and for you. Because when he's on a cross, the great irony is, okay, it's Jesus who is now naked. It's now Jesus who is the one who is completely written off by his friends and his whole community and even his Father in heaven. In fact, he is isolated. He's outside of the town, among the tombs. And just like Legion, Jesus is the one that's getting cut. He's getting cut open, and his blood is spilling. In order for Jesus to ultimately defeat evil, he had to take all of it in his very being. All of what is wrong, all of the evil, everything that's broken and messed up in the world, he gets covered in it on the cross, so that when you trust in him, you might be like Legion after the fact, who's sitting there clothed and in his right mind. We didn't look at that verse, but after Jesus casts out all these stuff from the sky, you have Legion who is clothed. He put some clothes on, and he is sitting there and he's calm, he's peaceful, just like that storm that was so violent and crazy and chaotic, and now peace, calm. Jesus goes to the cross in order to deal with every form of evil, so that the penalty of evil is reversed, and that the power of evil is broken, and so that one day ultimately it would guarantee that the presence of evil itself would be gone forever. So when you and I look at the cross, you know what it's saying to us? It is saying, when God looks out at the world, and he sees the violence, and he sees the chaos, and he sees broken and sinful and evil people, in his heart of hearts, he says, they are worth it to me to give up everything on their behalf for. I would rather give up my very life in order to have them and to heal them than to hold on to my life and to lose them. And just to make this personal, here's what this means for you and me. This means that you are worth it. You are worth it to the God of the universe. I cannot tell you how many countless times over the years I've been sitting with someone and they're talking about their life or their problems or things that they're struggling with, and they kind of have this moment where they just feel guilty about talking about it, and they just, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to burden you. I don't want to be a burden. And maybe you've heard people say that, of like, I don't want to talk about this because I don't want to be a burden to people. Maybe you've said this. I've said this. And of course, nobody wants to be a burden. That's not a fun thing to be. But I think what we really mean when we say, I don't want to be a burden to you, is we really mean, this is not worth it to you. My life, my problems, my pain, it's a waste of time for you. And Jesus is saying, you cannot be more wrong. You are infinitely worth it. Final thought. When you feel these things kind of bubbling up inside of you, this instinct towards, I feel out of control. I feel like I can't be restrained. Or I feel like I want to isolate from people. I want to sever some relationships. I don't want anything to do with those people anymore. Or you feel that self-destructive thing in you that you just keep choosing the thing that is harming you, or you keep believing messages that are just so painful to yourself. Talk to yourself in ways that Jesus would never talk to you like. When you feel those things, if I can lovingly encourage you, do not try doubling down on just trying harder, because you are way outmatched. It's like you going up against the hordes and the hordes of the orcs. Evil is way stronger than you. Evil is not stronger than Jesus. So do not run to yourself in your own efforts. Run to Jesus. He is your strength. He is your power. He is your mighty fortress, and he will provide for you what you cannot provide for yourself in your own weakness. One little word shall fell him. Amen. Let me pray. Father, thank you for the might and the power and the strength that we see revealed in Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. And I pray that even as we confront the evil within us, our own instincts, our own impulses to wreck our own lives and hurt others that we love and to damage the world, I pray that you would give us eyes to see it, to cut us off from the past, that you might indeed deliver us from evil, that we might walk in wholeness and in healing and in life and in freedom. Only you can provide for us what we cannot provide for ourselves. So do this. Help us to have a healthy and respect for the reality of evil, to take it seriously, but to take Jesus infinitely more seriously, because he is our mighty fortress, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.